I haven't rolled my foot at all in a Hoka, thankfully.
I didn't pay you to say that, right?
No, I haven't. And I do it often in other shoes. So
because I would say like I'm still to roll an ankle.
Welcome back to our favorite part of the holidays. It's time to listen to Sounds of Health, where we share the stories, people, and resources that help others to improve their physical, emotional, and financial well-being. I'm your host, Dave MacNiven, and today we welcome our guest, Antonio Tovar, who goes by Tovar. So Tovar is a field experience representative for Hoka. For those who don't know, Hoka, according to their website, makes gear for pro runners and first milers, ultra marathoners and mountain roamers, neighborhood walkers, and wild trail runners that lets moving go beyond performance. Everything they do is rooted in optimism, and I know we can all use a little bit more of that these days. Tovar, welcome to Sounds of Health.
Thank you, guys. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you. Before I get into kind of your story and the things that we want to talk about, I'll tell you a little bit about my background with Hoka specifically.
Yeah, I saw your shoes when I was coming in. It's second nature now. Look at people's feet.
Absolutely, I bet. So I actually used to work for a couple of nonprofits, and I was in charge of developing community teams that would run marathons and do all of these different athletic events for us. So I got really into different athletic shoes, and there was a brand that I was using when I was running. I did a few half marathons. I did a couple of the Ragnar relay races.
Yeah, those are fun.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like a brand loyalist, I guess I would describe myself. When I like something, I really like it, and I kind of like live by it. And this one brand worked for me for a long time. And the Hokas were just starting to come out, at least for me. I just started to notice, and they were so different. Just the way the heel was and the bright colors that they were using. And I thought, I'll never be able to pull those off, so I'm not even going to try them on, And then years later, the brand I was using, I don't know if they changed something or my foot changed. It wasn't really supporting me in the way that I needed it to. And I started to notice these more and more. And I thought, you know what, let me give it a shot. I saw a sale online and I purchased just kind of like these black Hokas, right? And man, right away, I loved them. They were absolutely fantastic. Yeah. They helped me to get back into running. They felt like they supported me and my stride and my body more. And I've been wearing them ever since.
Well, first of all, thank you for being a fan, of course. But that's an interesting story, and that's something that we hear a lot at Hoka, and that's actually kind of like my story of how I ended up with Hoka. I broke my ankle 10 years ago, and I was getting back into running, and I saw Hoka at a marathon expo. And I'm like, well, what I need right now is a lot of cushioning. That's what I thought at the time. And not particularly because of the ankle, because how much I had the conditioned while I was healing from that.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So, and I'm like, well, those look super ridiculous. They look like something out of a 90s Spice Girls video.
Right.
Right.
Totally. Yeah.
But I bought a pair. I'm like, you know what? Like I've been, maybe that's the engineer in me. I always like to try things that are different and have an opinion. So I bought my first pair, and it was the Bondi 3. Right now we're at the Bondi 8, and that's how I started wearing Hoka, right? So it's like we hear a lot of these stories of like I needed more, whether it's because like an injury or I'm adding mileage or whatever it may be.
Sure.
The curiosity comes out of like having a good reputation and needing more from your footwear.
Yeah, absolutely. And the design kind of shows that, right? I mean, the fact that the heel and the support of it is so prominent in the shoe design, you can kind of look at them and say, oh, yeah, that gives me more support, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. So tell me a little bit about your background and like, how did you get to where you are today?
Luck, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of
as
that.
As most of us, yeah.
So my background professionally, it's I'm a biomedical engineer. I have a master's in biomechanics and clinical research. And I did a lot of my career was spent doing technology development for various types of disabilities and rehabilitation. Part of it was understanding disability in a way that could help us prevent further disability. Mm-hmm. Perfect example, wheelchair users. our shoulders, our elbows, our wrists are not designed to do that, to push a wheelchair, So I did early in my career a lot of research around that. And then I moved into the actual application of technology with exoskeletons, gait retraining, movement analysis. I work with a lot of big names in the industry back in Mexico City, where I'm from. And then the opportunity came to move to the States, working for one of those brands in Massachusetts. And that's how I ended up here in this country 10 years ago.
A brand that was developing exoskeletons?
Yes, they're kind of, they're a big brand. The name is Hokoma. Right now it's DIH. They're part of a different, group.
Yeah.
But they were a little bit, the brands that you would think of as a gold standard for robotic gait training.
Okay.
Really, really big names. So when I explored the possibility to move out of the country, which was a very cushy life that I had, it's like, well, I'm gonna do it only for A, B, and C brands. That was one of those. So I had the opportunity, came to the States. I worked in that until the pandemic. Nothing to do entirely with the pandemic. It just was the timing of it. That's when my cycle came to that conclusion.
Do you mind just for the layperson like myself, because I hear exoskeleton, I immediately go to Iron Man. I go to these crazy suits that people will wear, but really it's more of a practical and often medical applied usage.
Absolutely.
Do you mind just going into that just a little bit?
Not at all. Exoskeleton basically means a skeleton that goes on the outside, right? That's literally how it translates from, the root of the word, right? So yes, Iron Man is an exoskeleton. So you're absolutely correct. There's been a little bit of, I feel like in the last years, you see a lot of these videos pop up on Instagram in which people have like braces that are worn on the outside, right? That is if that brace, has support and some sort of additional movement to what you're already doing, it can be considered like an exoskeleton.
Okay,
right?
That makes sense.
So there's a lot of different, we have hard exoskeletons, soft exoskeletons, right? Because there's some of them that work with bands, that work with wires, things like that.
Yeah.
And then we have what you're talking about, the actual robotic piece that goes outside of your body. And that's more what I worked in, right?
Wow.
So the idea behind this is that if you, going a little more technical, a motor gesture, anything that you do, takes a while to be learned, right?
Yeah.
So depending on where you look, research shows that it's maybe somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 repetitions for something to become, second nature. What is really interesting, though, is that it's not, if I throw 3,000 baseballs, makes me, top pitcher.
Right.
It has to be 3,000 perfect pitches.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
What is and then there's a part of like, my body's not going to be in the same condition. My mind is not going to be in the same condition. So, statistically, I'm more likely to do good pitches if I had thousands of good pitches, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So the same thing applies to walking, right? When we were young, we tried to walk thousands and thousands of times until finally we kind of like figured out, and we figured out what happens if I'm leaning to get a mug, what happens if I'm carrying a ball. So that's when we see, kids and toddlers, and like you see how that gait, it's always clumsy.
Yeah.
Because they're still figuring out
it's like that baby deer, right? Like getting up and learning how to walk. If they're stumbling, they're moving in a different way.
I maybe have 3,000 steps within my playing pen. Right? But then I start exploring the kitchen, and then, those count for nothing. This is a whole new motor gesture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the idea behind it is that if you have a piece of machinery that is programmed to do the exact same range of motion, then all your repetitions are successful.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about neurological incidents, you're relearning, you're rewiring your brain. Right?
Wow.
So if you have the exact pattern, it kind of makes it statistically, it's more likely that all your repetitions are going to be successful.
So those devices are a shortcut to recovery?
I would say they're an aid to recovery.
They're an aid, okay.
Because, this is something that I used, after being more involved with the technology part, I moved to be very involved in the clinical education of these technologies. And I would often say, to PTs and doctors, like, this is never going to take your job because it's a tool.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it's a different tool. Right.
Right.
It's just like everything else.
Yeah.
Is it what you think about, like what would happen if you didn't have it, is that you would have one or two people manually moving this person's leg that it's starting to learn how to move again. Right? Again, let's go to the toddler, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have somebody holding their hands, and then maybe the parent is like just kind of like supporting that knee so it doesn't bend. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So same thing, but with an adult. So if we have, an exoskeleton, a robot that attaches to your legs, then that takes that part off.
Yeah, sure.
But you still have to be in charge of how is this going to be applied.
Right.
Dosage, ranges of motion, all that is clinical observation. So I wouldn't say it's like a shortcut, because you still need to have that behind it.
Yeah, it just supports the having a movement that's not wasted.
Exactly.
So you're not constantly trying to figure out what that perfect movement is that I need to repeat. That's taken care of.
Correct.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible work. So how do you go from there to Hoka?
Well, I've always been a runner. So, running was my first love when it comes to sports.
Yeah.
I was not a good runner when I was young. I was a very overweight kid, which is, I think that's what I like running so much, because I never did it when I was a kid.
Gotcha.
I started running on the treadmill, just warming up for the gym. And then at some point I realized that I spent the whole hour on the treadmill. So I'm like, well, I guess I like this more than the weights.
Yeah, right.
And running became a tool for me to, even though I was in the track and field team in college, I was not particularly good. I was bottom of the list for that. But running became a very good tool for me to do things that I really liked, which was rock climbing and mountaineering. So running builds that base.
Yeah.
So I was out climbing people that were stronger than me just because I had more endurance, right?
Yeah.
So running has always been a part of my life since 2006, 7, right?
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to explore what it would be like to make that my livelihood, right? Like do this day in and day out. So after the pandemic, when I stopped, working at this company, I did consulting for a couple of years with a former boss of mine. So we stayed within the same field, just doing consulting for European companies that wanted to open a market space in the US. And while I was in that very flexible space, a race director from an ultra marathon that I run in Rhode Island, that I run it every year, the Anchor Down Ultra, I was having a friendly conversation with him, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, Hoka is hiring. You always told me that you wanted to explore that option." I'm like, "Okay," and that was it. That's why I say it's a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
So you still go through the process, right?
Course.
I applied to the job. I had a lot of different interviews. I really appreciate how thorough Hoka is in their interviewing process. Now that I'm inside the company, and I've seen also how those interviews are conducted and all that fun stuff, I think that it's really valuable how much they focus on the personal aspect of the person that is being hired.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the skill set, sure, but the amount of weight they put into your values, your personality, how you align. I mean, when you were reading that from the website, which I haven't read in a hot second, to be honest.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I mean, the fun part, right?
Yeah, that culture.
That culture of
important.
inclusivity, and for me, inclusion is a very strong word for me, right? And for me, it's very inclusive to take, hey, we're going to take this guy that is 8 to 10 years older than the rest of the team.
Yeah.
And comes out of the left field from the medical field, but like, hey, let's bring him in, right? So, I mean, for me, that speaks to the culture of the
What's
company.
the position you applied for?
The position that I have right now, which is,
okay.
yes, I've only been with Hoka for a little bit over a year. I joined in summer of 22.
Okay.
So, no, summer of 23? Oh my God. This summer was a year. Yes. Summer of 23. Yes. Summer of 23.
Yes. We're in 24.
Correct. Yes.
And I get confused as well.
Yeah. So I'm starting on my second year this upcoming summer. Yes. 25. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, yes. So it's field experience representative is the official role.
Okay.
As I was sharing with you guys before we started recording. So at Hoka has a very strong field marketing team. And basically that's everything that is consumer facing, right?
Yeah.
A lot of we're very lucky. Hoka is a brand that people look for, right? They come asking.
Yeah, for sure.
My friend, my partner recommended, I see these, I see that. Like, you know what I mean? It's not something that, oh, let me show you this thing.
Yeah.
So the marketing on the field, it's a really cool position because it kind of like empowers people like myself to build those bridges with community, which is exactly what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
It's exactly how Jason and I met a couple of months ago. And that is really cool because there's no, there's not it's not about, yes, there's a part of campaigns and all that, but it's not just that, right?
Right.
And we all bring our different flavors, right? I have some of my colleagues that are deeply rooted into, ultra running communities. Other people are more about, one of my colleagues, he also has a nonprofit for helping keep the trails clean. So a lot of the things he does is around that.
Yeah.
We have other people that are really into sustainability. So they do a lot of, Hoka related connections and events with that twist.
Yeah,
so it's
that's
kind
great.
of really cool because you create, these connections.
Yeah, and just jumping in on that, so for our listeners, it is about community and brand and making the two together and that relationship. I met Tovar over at Orange Theory. Thank you to Heidi, Coach Heidi, who was a guest on our podcast. She had Hoka come in to showcase shoes for gym members, and the opportunity was there. Not only that you could show the brand, but also learn a little bit about shoes and how they can make running better for you or make your training better. So yeah, that community involvement huge, and of course we would never have met if that wasn't there. You know? But as I was saying before we started, we kind of do the same thing with our work through Medicare sales, through health insurance sales. A lot of what we do is giving back to the community with educational information. Engaging in health and wellness, this podcast, for example. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is being essential to, a good brand, good relationships, learning and giving back to the community.
Exactly, because in the end, I think that one of the very cool, not to say that the pandemic was cool, but one of the cool things in the aftermath is that I feel that we all started to be more connected.
For sure.
To our communities, right? Because you had to stay local. There was no, what I mean? So I feel that was some of the good. I think there were a lot of good things that came out of the pandemic. Not that I mean, if we could erase it, it would be amazing.
Of course.
But
goes without saying.
But there were some really interesting, outcomes of that. And I think what you're saying, that as brands, connecting with the communities is really where it's at, right? And also brands like Hoka that are about movement, about wellness, which also became a priority. We are probably one of the few companies that, started to see, a rise around, pandemic because, the outdoors were not closed.
Yeah.
So a lot of people started walking. A lot of people started running.
Yeah.
And, as you were saying, people that maybe they were new to the sports, they needed more support or people that they never thought about walking, but they were boring and they have some sort of pathology and they need some support in their footwear. They're looking at Hoka.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing that came out of the pandemic in the senior population was the fact that there was so much isolation during that time. And that's something that we're still kind of battling against as we're reaching a couple of years now coming out of it. But community, like you were saying, it's just so important for all the various communities. And in the introduction to the information I pulled off your website, I do love how, you guys make gear for everyone from the pro runner to the first miler. This isn't just for the ultra marathoners. This is for people who are out there maybe just starting, maybe getting a walking routine, maybe getting a running routine, that kind of thing. So definitely a product that can be used by so many different people.
Yeah, and that's something that, at Hoka, product is, we will never have a shortcut in a product, if that makes sense. Like every single piece of equipment, whether it's a shoe, apparel, has these roots in performance. Yeah. I was having a conversation, I was at the New York Marathon, and our slides were part of the things that we had there, showing. And then somebody had a very blunt question of, why should I pay this much for a slide?
Yeah.
Right? Well, because this slide is built like our shoes are. This slide has, same geometries. It has also the same components you find in a running shoe. So it's a slide that you can be on the slide all day and it's not going to have any impact on your gait or how tired you are, right?
Yeah.
So even simple things from the slides always have that performance in mind is something that is really important to us.
That's awesome. I know we work with the senior population and what we do in Medicare and things like that. And walking programs are one of those things. We always say, you need a pair of sneakers. That's it. There's a very small barrier to getting involved. And we promote the different programs that are in the community for people to use. But this is kind of the first step, is finding a shoe that really supports your needs. Absolutely. So that you can at least feel better as you're doing it, because we all know how difficult it can be to get started. But with the proper equipment, it makes it that much easier.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's like the famous phrase, right? There's not bad weather, only bad gear.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The same situation.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I want to go back to your personal experience for just a minute too, because going from being a biomedical engineer to now being really a community builder for a brand, it doesn't seem like it makes a whole lot of sense. But as you tell the story, it really does. There is a through line there. And I'm just curious how much of a transition it was for you to go from what you were doing to this. And is it something that you can kind of see yourself doing for the long term?
That's a $1 million question that I have with me, conversation I have with myself, often. I think that, in the end, as cliche as it sounds, doing things that make you happy are our priority. And also, I realize that I do speak from a privilege of, I have a safety net. I can always go back to what I did. Right. So if I'm changing my careers at my age, that's fine. I live in a double income household, I know there's certain privileges to doing the things that I'm doing. Right. Right. And I'm thankful and acknowledge that. But, I had a very, light bulb moment earlier this year. I was at a medical conference. It's the APTA CSM. So it's a combined section meeting for the American Physical Therapists Association. So it's one of the biggest conferences that you have for PTs. Mm-hmm. I was part of that every single year since I moved to this country, right? With my other job.
Yeah, right.
So it was very interesting because, of course, I have a hiatus from 2020. I was there as a consultant with this new role that I had at some point in Chicago when we opened up again in 21. But I was removed from that, right? Yeah. So the APTA, I go to this year as part of Hoka. And I'm high of having everybody that I know there because, it's the usual suspects. It's a very small field when you go to that part of neo rehab with robotics. I mean, people are probably just at a different booth, but it's the same people, right?
Right.
It's the same usual suspects,
I feel like most industries are like that.
Yeah. So when they're a little bit niche, it's like that, right?
For sure.
You just switch shirts.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So I had a very aha moment there because, I remember, little things like just having to wear a suit and stuff like that. That was I like what I did, but the way I did it was probably not in tune with my personality, if that makes sense.
It does.
And yeah, it's really cool in a romantic way of you're helping people to walk again. That's very powerful. But I had 3-4 people during that show that put them in Hokas, and they were walking with a smile for the first time.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah,
and they were like,
great.
oh my God, I never thought that I was going to be able to feel comfortable in shoes again. Because you take the time to understand what their needs are. Right?
Yeah.
And it's you're still, and to answer your question, I see those bridges is where the transition is very easy. You're still helping people.
Right.
Just maybe from a different stage, from a different perspective. Right?
Yeah.
And I think, the freedom that Hoka gives us as employees to deliver their message as we see fit allows us to find those avenues, right? One of the things that I've been doing for the past 7 years, I'm a guide for adaptive athletes, for runners. So I run with people that maybe are using prosthetics or that are visually impaired and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right? But through the Achilles Foundation, they're fantastic.
Right.
It's bright neon shirts in every major marathon. Those are the guys.
Yeah.
And now we do events with them, and we do fittings for people that maybe have some balance issues because disabilities come in different shapes and sizes. Another aha moment for me was in March when I fitted somebody with 2 prosthetics.
Wow.
Yeah, because there's also an aspect to prosthetics, right?
Yeah.
And I just worked with a runner that I met in the Nantucket Triathlon. Cedric, he's an amazing guy. He's a double amputee, so he runs into carbon fiber blades, the running blades that we see on TV. He's a tall guy, he's a heavy guy because he's big. So we're talking about it, and the blade creates great propulsion, but it doesn't absorb any shock.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, we have so much shock absorption in our bodies, muscles, tendons, joints, active joints, passive joints. There's so many things that go into us being able to run.
Right.
You take that away and you just put a piece that only bends in one direction and flops back.
I never really thought of
right?
that. Yeah.
And that was a little bit of a limiting factor for him because, like, at some point, I'm just tired and in pain. So, I mean, this is the shoe, the Skyflow. So, I sent him a couple of Skyflows, and he worked with his prosthetic expert to retrofit the outsole to his blades.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And he sent me like the coolest video. Like, he was like, bro, you cannot do this to me, man. I had to physically slow down because I was having so much better energy return.
Oh, wow. That's
incredible. Tuning his running through the shoe. Wow.
So so there's like, I mean, it's still back to your question on the transition, right? Like, I'm so lucky that I get to also use some of my skill set and my background too.
And how normalizing and rewarding is it? I can assume possibly for him, being able to wear a brand that people are talking about and showcase his shoes, something that he wasn't able to do more with his running. But that's so fascinating. I've always watched the Paralympics in events that feature guides, and it's just what amazing stories you must encounter, the people that you meet, that seems like such rewarding work.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's I mean, I always say that I don't know who gets the reward, to be honest. I really don't. I got involved with this group through some friends that I have that they're veterans.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I got involved. My good buddy Earl, he called me like, "Hey, you want to run a marathon with me?" That was it. I was like, "How does that work?" Well, we'll just go. Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Very gung ho attitude that we have sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And I was in the New York City Marathon, like I said, and I also ran it. So I was working with Hoka. I run it with Jonathan Lopez. He's also a veteran. We have become very good friends over the years, and I was his guide. I had very, very poor life choices the weekend before, and I ran a 40-miler the weekend before.
Oh, boy.
And then 2 weeks.
I don't know if 40-mile ultra marathon is a poor life choice, but okay.
Considering that I had to run
before the New York Marathon.
Considering that I had to be on my feet 8 hours a day, 3 days prior to running
you're supposed to taper before the marathon, right?
Yeah, correct. But we have that kind of relationship. Johnny and I was like, "Hey, man, we're just gonna make it happen," and we had a great run. We really did, right? Like, his goal was to go under 6 hours. So we finished in 5:51, which was terrific.
Yeah. And phenomenal. An amazing event. I mean, one of my favorites.
Oh, it's a party, right? But at some point, we were having these conversations. He was like, "Hey, man, thanks for being out there. I know that it was a little bit hectic and whatnot." I was like, "No, like, honestly, if we didn't have your goal, I wouldn't be pushing myself right now." So, kind of like going back to what I said, like, I don't know really who's getting the reward. Like, you got me out of like the whole attitude of feeling sorry for myself. I should have, not been on my feet working.
Right, yeah.
I just did this thing when I'm doing this, like all this negative talk. And I just realized that I'm perfectly capable of running a marathon a week later.
Yeah.
Thank God. Like, I'm super thankful. Like, I don't take that for granted.
It sounds like
but
an incredible
I would
experience.
have not been able to find that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that brings us, getting exposed to this type of situation just brings you perspective and different ways of tackling life and struggles.
Yeah. I mean, the whole story, your whole story sounds amazing, and the experience that you're having with Hoka, fantastic. So this is the first time that with Sounds of Health that we're really kind of doing a holiday episode, because we brought you on thinking that, that's also a great time for it, right? Because Black Friday's coming up, the holidays are coming up, people are going to be looking for, different unique gift ideas for family members and friends. Sure. Tell us a little bit about what you guys have coming up with Hoka. Are there any specials or things that people should look out for?
And not particularly. I mean, at Hoka, we are very conservative when it comes to having promotions and things like that. Things that typically go on sale on our website are either colors or models that are going to be, starting to phase out.
Sure, yeah.
So, I mean, right now, for example, on our website, if you go online, there's a couple of things that are shoes that is still relevant, but colorways that are transitioning out because they were seasonal.
Yeah.
Right? So, for example, the Max 6 has a couple of things on sale, and it's a fantastic daily trainer. I think it's the one that we tried at Ocean Theory, right?
Yeah,
that was it, right?
Exactly it. Yeah, and that's just a lighter shoe in general helped me. So thank you.
We have a couple of colors that are on sale. The Bondi 8 is on sale. So I would say go to the website.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think that where there's opportunity to is with our retailers.
Okay.
Right? Because a lot of our retailers, local retailers, we have maybe some other promotions. Whether that's not particularly, maybe you're going to see this shoe on sale that is not on sale on Hoka.com, but maybe some other benefits, so I would say always, reach out to the local retailers is always the best way to go.
Okay, good to know. Now, what do you tell someone who doesn't know what model they should get or what shoe would be right for them?
That's great. So the first thing I would say is definitely try to get to a running store. So, in Hoka, we're available through different channels.
Okay.
Right. I mean, we're in Connecticut, so the closest you're in the middle of our two stores. So one is in Boston, the other one is in New York City.
Okay.
Right.
Great, yeah.
So you want to go to a Hoka experience. Those are the two. But there are many running stores that carry.
Yeah,
Hoka,
we have
right?
some great ones here.
Exactly. Yeah. And running stores have the people that know the product and know how to look at your gait. So I would say that would be number one.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. But if you're like, well, I'm going to buy online anyway. Okay, cool. So I would say, start with daily trainers, right? I mean, in our website, it's really comprehensive because it tells you, if this is it kind of gives you a gauge when it comes to the amount of cushioning that you have.
Yeah.
Whether it's a responsive, a balanced, or a plush.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So I would say a good place to start, I would say start in the middle because and then you can go from there. Right?
Yeah.
We have an excellent customer service. You can try our shoe for 30 days.
Okay, good to know.
Return it if you don't like it. Or if you become a member, which is nothing more like leaving your email, there's no fee or anything to it. You have 60 days.
Okay.
So, I would say, anything that's neutral, anything that is balanced is a good place to start. Unless, for example, you already know that you have certain needs. Like, for example, added stability. Some people do need added stability.
Yeah, of course.
We have a couple of stability shoes. One of them is the Gaviota, which I brought a big bag of shoes. So, okay. Can we dive a little bit into footwear for a bit?
Yeah, of course.
All right, cool. So let's start there. So before we go into what makes it special, let's talk about what Hoka is about, right?
Sure, let's do that.
So there are three things that make every Hoka, right? The first one is the one that I talked about that was the thing that brought my attention, which is the cushion midsole.
Okay.
So you guys have seen it, and the people that are listening or viewing, Hokas are known for having that big stack, right?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to me because that came out in a time where the tendencies were the opposite. Mm-hmm. The tendency was the 5-finger shoes,
right? Yeah, the barefoot running.
Yeah. And I run in sandals many years. I still run in sandals over the summer. There's absolutely nothing wrong with barefoot running, right? Mm-hmm. The situation was when, like everything else, when we just consume it, right? Instead of starting analyzing it, right? Like we spend a lot of years deconditioning our feet. We have.
Yeah, right.
It's true.
Absolutely.
Right? So you cannot go from not using your feet to I'm going to wear barefoot shoes all day, every day. I mean, some people can, and but it's not going to be the standard,
of
right?
course.
So, while I always say there's really absolutely nothing that is going to be taking the place of having a good foundation, like work out on your feet, work out on your ankles, right? Mm-hmm. The life that we live requires sometimes footwear,
right? For
a number of reasons. One, we were not meant to be sitting down this much.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Two, our bodies were perfect, but I don't think there's, walking on hard surfaces was not the original design, right? For like 8 hours a day, right? Yeah. Like being on your foot, like there's no survival situation in which you have to be standing on your feet for 10 hours.
Right.
And we do at some jobs.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no survival situation in which, you're going to be running 100 miles. At that point, nature wins, you get eaten.
Heels were not, heels were not in nature, wearing high heels.
Exactly. So all these things, right? Like all these things. So that's what I would say, that's kind of like, yes, do your barefoot training, do all your PTs, all that fun stuff.
Right.
But, footwear comes to fill those performance needs.
Right.
Let's not call it NE8s or anything. It's a performance need.
Of course. Yeah.
Whatever your performance is, whether it's your job or an athletic endeavor, like I want to run 100 miles.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So anyway, long story to the cushion midsole was really a trailblazing thing for us at Hoka because everybody was doing the opposite. Right. The book Born to Run came out, which is a fantastic read. I highly recommend it. And we are like, oh, let's all run like indigenous people. Let's do it.
Right. Yeah.
and I say we because I did it, right? Like you know. Yeah. So I think that's very cool that the brand we are the ones that started doing that many years ago, and we stuck with it.
Yeah.
A lot of other brands are gonna have similar geometries because it's out there, right? Like there's no you don't have
there's no patent on putting more cushion.
We cannot have a patent on electrolytes, right? We just know they work.
Right, of course.
Now, whatever you buy is up to you, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the same thing.
Absolutely.
So, but anyway, Hoka is going to have that cushion midsole. All of our shoes are going to have that. But we've been doing foams for so long that we got pretty good at it. So all of our foams are going to be very cushioned, but also have, a supportive nature. Okay. Right. Mm-hmm. There are different things that you can talk about to not get very technical, but there's a lot of different things that make a foam unique. One of them is going to be, resiliency. Another one is going to be their compression set. Like all these are different values that tell you how it's going to behave. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But we all have experienced to some degree that cushion is not the same. Right. Like think about a memory foam. Mm-hmm. Like it feels great. Mm-hmm. But after a while, it's just a flat surface that is shaped to you.
Right.
Yeah. Those foams change over time.
That's also the other thing, right? So all of our foams are very premium foams that have very good, very low compression sets, very high resiliency. They're going to last long. Their shape is going to come back, as you unload them. So all of our foams are going to be very high quality. And then depending on what the shoe is intended for, you're going to have something like the Clifton, which is, I always say it's a great place to start, is like our Swiss Army knife, I call it.
Yeah.
Having access to every single shoe that we sell. I still go for the Clifton. I wish I had more expensive taste, but this is the one that I love.
Good to know.
It's middle of the pack, right? I mean, but if you're looking for a little bit more cushioning, then we have other options.
Right.
Yeah. And then on the trail universe, you also see like a different cushioning, but all of them have a good amount of cushioning.
Yeah.
And that's what in the website you're going to see: responsive, balanced, plush.
Right.
So a cushion midsole, it's, one of the things that makes a Hoka.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
Staying with that is also relevant is the geometry that you spoke of earlier, right? We have this rocker geometry, helps with efficiency, right? We call it meta rocker because, the metatarsal joints, they're kind of like rocking around that fulcrum. Depending on what the goal of the shoe is, of what it's intended for, that rocker is going to be shifting a little bit towards the rear of the shoe,
right,
or the front of the shoe,
depending on if you heel strike or not, right? So,
and depending like also like where are we going that with the shoe? If it's going to be like a racing shoe, if it's going to be like a walking shoe, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
But every single Hoka is going to have some of that. So this is a perfect example we have here on the table. So the Cielo X1, which is our like pinnacle racing shoe, it just
super rocking.
Exactly. It's a curvature that it just kind of keep rocking and rocking. Okay. Yeah. The idea is, of course, if you're racing, if you have less time on your feet, even if it's a tenth of a second, it adds up.
Yeah. Right. For sure. Yeah.
So super aggressive geometry, right? Where we have something more daily oriented, like for example, the Clifton, it also has that rocker, but it's not as pronounced.
It's not as pronounced,
right?
Yeah.
So all of our shoes going to have that rocker.
Yeah.
And the third thing that makes a Hoka is what we call active foot frame. So I heard this from one of my colleagues and I adopted it, and I think it's the best way to explain it. So think about a surfboard, right? Being on a surfing board versus being in a canoe.
Okay.
Right? Or in a kayak.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to our shoes, we are a little bit more like a kayak. Right?
Okay.
So I think the perfect example, let's start with what the opposite is. And I think the perfect example is like a Converse Chuck Taylor.
Okay.
Like we can all visualize that, right?
Absolutely.
It's a flat piece of rubber.
Yep. Right.
Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you're just trusting that the upper kind of works with you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Kind of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But like, for example, if we're doing, direction shifts, you can imagine how that's probably not going to be great because you're basically falling off the surfboard. Right.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So I'm going to start with what we know, and I use this example because it's not a performance shoe, so I don't feel like I'm talking bad about anything there. So, and then with Hoka, if I fold the upper, you can actually, it's easy to see. I mean, for our listeners, you're not able to see it.
Right.
But basically, the upper is collapsing.
Turn it this way. You might be able to show into the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
It's collapsing into the shoe.
The upper is collapsing inside the shoe.
Yeah.
Right? So, thanks for the cues on the camera, by the way.
Yeah.
You know who does this and who doesn't.
Right, exactly.
So basically, the support comes from the bottom up.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right? So we call this an active foot frame.
Active foot frame, okay.
Right? I was in an ultra running podcast, and they call it the wraparound technology.
Wraparound technology. That's cool.
I thought it was funny.
But it does. It's like sitting in like a wide boat.
Correct.
Versus a surfboard.
So the support comes from the bottom up, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very supportive ride. And also, like you're making the most out of your foam, right? Because
I
mean, the other example that I use is think about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich versus an Uncrustable, right? Like the jelly stays inside, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So like when you put the pressure on it, the foam, you know what I mean? Like the foam is just not going everywhere, but you're also getting some of that return as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So I guess does that help with correction when you're maybe rolling inside or outside?
Yeah, that's a great example. That's a great question. So most of our shoes are neutral, but because of these things that I'm mentioning, they're going to feel supportive either way. So
I haven't rolled my foot at all in a Hoka, thankfully.
I didn't pay you to say that, right?
No, I haven't. And I do it often in other shoes. So
because I would say like I'm still to roll an ankle in a Hoka. I mean, I've rolled my ankle like in the last year and a half that I've been wearing predominantly Hokas, but it's because I'm in the trail and
of course, accidents
you're pushing yourself,
right? Of course, yeah.
But like the whole concept of rolling your ankle on an easy run, like thank God it's not there anymore
and
for me.
I use the Clifton. That's what I have right now, and just because of the wide curve base, it helps with any type of correction. That
and also how
don't have to think about it as much.
Yeah, for sure.
And also like how you are really locked into the shoe, right? Like because the shoe is around you. You have a little bit more support in that regard. So to answer your question, so they're going to feel typically more supportive, right? Also, the other thing is that not every geometry is the same. For example, we call this shaping and grooving. So all the spaces that you have in the outsole and in the midsole are purpose. They have a purpose, are purposeful.
Right.
So it's so that you can still. Even though it's a very high stack shoe, you can still bend. You can still have some activation of those classic joints, right? And also you have some grooves that will compress where you need to have that compression for shock absorption. And you have some reinforcements when it comes to the geometry so that they don't compress where they shouldn't, where you need to be supported. So all of our shoes are going to be inherently a little bit, have that feeling of support. However, we do have specific models that are for pronation supination, right? And those are stability shoes, which is what led on this rabbit hole when you asked me like, hey, where you start? Well, start in the middle of the pack, unless
I could see how excited you got when I asked that question. So that was great. And so what you're saying too is that a lot of what we're seeing in the design of the shoe is not just for aesthetic. It's got a purpose behind it. It's actually built to do something.
I mean, I think it's safe to say that with our brand, the only really truly aesthetic thing are colors.
Yeah, the colors.
Everything else is with some type of performance reasoning behind it. Even where the stitching and the upper goes, where you have the little holes. Like, sometimes it's not, this pattern looks cool. No. It's just, this is where you need ventilation, right?
Right.
This is where you need ventilation, but probably you cannot have more ventilation there because you're compromising the structure of the shoe.
Sure.
Right? So, sometimes the decisions, all the times the decisions are based on performance, and sometimes as a consumer, we think that it's aesthetic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But with our shoes, most of our decisions come from that. And, going back to the question, the Gaviota is, for example, it's one of our stability shoes. So we have two stability shoes, the Gaviota and the Arahi.
Okay.
The Gaviota, it's a little bit more on the cushion side, right? And the way we tackle the stability concept in this shoe is that we have two different layers of foam. For folks that are able to see that, you can even see the different color changes, right? So if you can visualize what a shoe looks like from the top, if we draw a figure 8, right, having that center of the figure 8 right around in the middle of your arch, right, that's a frame. We call it the H frame.
Okay.
Right? Also like a little H kind of, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And it's like having guarding rails. So we have this piece of foam that is kind of like your landing gear. And then we have this frame that we put in the middle that helps you have those, like,
that's interesting.
Those I think about like when you were bowling and you were a kid, or if you still do it as an adult, it doesn't matter. But the railings,
the rails up,
right, like the rail guards.
It's
right?
okay, Jay. You can use the rail guards. It's all right.
The rail guards, right? And
Right.
it becomes like a pinball, but but that kind of concept, right? So that's how we tackle it. When it comes to the Arahi, we have it's actually entirely different density of foam at the heel strike, right? Up on the heel strike, and then it kind of like follows through as well. That back in the day was known as posting. But so we have that specific. So I know that this is oh God, what do I do? The question was, where do I start? Well, I would say start with a middle of the pack, like the Clifton.
Okay.
Experience the shoe, and then if you need more cushioning or if you need more stability, then you move into the other options.
Right.
Or maybe you're in the situation like, hey, I need something that it's more performance oriented.
Yeah.
So you start to look into our more race-oriented shoe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to kind of bring it back to where we began with that question too. So first of all, I mean, what a great product. It's something that I'm using every single day. And as you said, we're not built to sit around, right? So you can see I have a standing desk here. Yeah. I notice the difference when I wear my Hokas to work as opposed to my work shoes, like my business shoes. It makes a complete difference in the way I feel by the end of the day when I'm standing all day, And then also for people that want to get started, let's also encourage them to go to their local running stores. Those local running stores, they have fantastic staff. They know what they're talking about. They can take a look at your stride and at your gait, and they can recommend where you go with a Hoka. Check out the Hoka website. There's a lot of really amazing information on there. And this is something, as the holidays are approaching, like you said, there's no real sales, but some of those older models do go on clearance.
Yep.
That's how I got into it. I went on and I got a lower, like an older model, and I tried that out first and then realized I loved it. And now, of course, I'm paying for the newer ones. But no, I do encourage people to give it a shot, buy it for a family member. You guys even do really well with the wide sizes. Like I always need the wide size. I have a wide foot. So those things are really important as well.
Yeah, no. And yeah, thanks for mentioning that. So we actually have expanded our selection of wide and extra wide.
Awesome.
Next year, we also have some of, the models that we've heard the feedback that, hey, it'd be amazing if we have this in wide or extra wide. It's coming.
Oh, great.
We already had, it's really cool because this year and also last year, but we already have releases in which they already come in wide upon release, right? Like we don't wait
that's
until,
great.
So because it's part of the inclusion, right?
Yeah,
making sure they have something for everybody, right? And, going back to where you're saying about going to local retailers, besides the obvious part of you get first-hand information.
Yeah.
Second part, support your local communities.
Of course,
right?
Yeah, definitely.
But also part of the work that we do in the field marketing team, it's do product education with these stores. So also everything that I'm saying right now, it's something that I have shared with your local running company at some point, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's in person or virtually, we have a very robust education online for retailers that carry our product.
That's great.
But also a lot of our time it's spent when we're not doing podcasts. It's spent talking to people in stores, talking about the product, especially when we have new launches.
Yeah, and don't be intimidated. If you're just starting out, I always say that I'm not really a runner, and people always like, do you run? And I'm like, yeah. Well, then you're a runner, right? Like, are you walking? Are you trying? Are you working towards something? Don't feel intimidated walking into a running store and asking for some help and some guidance, because that's what people are there for. And these products can be life-changing. They can really help you to get and meet your goals. And I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah, and on that note, I think that you have to choose which discomfort you want to carry, right?
Right.
You want to carry the discomfort of asking one question, or you want to carry the discomfort of not having the right product for you, because this is what happens sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
The biggest obstacle I think I had was returning a shoe. you try a shoe, it's not working out for you. I was like, well, I guess I'll just hold on to it until I need another one. No, like it's okay if something isn't working for you. Like you said, Hoka has online their return policy on the shoe that you can try it. If it's not working for you, you can send it back, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, and you know what? You touch a very good point too, because a lot of us also feel I don't want to be wasteful, like of course, or maybe also the personal part, like I don't want to feel like it makes me feel uncomfortable to go return something that I used, right? Like I get that. When we go to Hoka.com, well, first of all, it's faceless, so you just put another label, drop it at your UPS, and you're done.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, that's also a difficult part too, because we're a wasteful society, right? And that's something that we all think about, right? I always say, I will feel very bad if I return it because it's a color, but if it's but if it's in the way of my health,
right?
Then that's a decision that I have to make too.
Absolutely.
And at Hoka, we do a lot of efforts to try to reduce that impact that we have from using a lot of recycled materials. We even have a couple of shoes that are mostly recycled materials.
Wow.
Take a closer look to best practice, but more in more practical ways. For example, when I was there with you at Orange Theory, so we had so basically, Dave, we have like a full size set. So because our idea of experiencing the shoe is to give you a different experience that is from a store. So put the shoe on, go run for an hour, come back.
That's awesome.
Tell me that you like it or not.
Yeah. It definitely helps to experience the shoe.
Oh, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So, people putting shoes on people's feet is one of our priorities, right? Those shoes, we don't run them through the ground, because then, people like Jason that was at this event, you wouldn't have a new shoe experience, right? Like there's only a certain amount of times that you run a shoe.
You have to retire the shoe eventually.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. And we try to do it earlier than you as a consumer would, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So these shoes, it's always a question like, oh, can I buy it when it's not? No, we donate them.
Oh, okay.
So all these shoes go to different places. For example, I personally work with the Boston Bulldogs, which is a running group that helps support people that are going through addictions and their families through running.
Wow.
That's awesome. A lot of these people are living in temporary homes, or are, at a difficult point in their lives. Yeah. They want to start running. They don't have running shoes.
Gotcha.
And as we know,
that's awesome.
if you're running,
biggest obstacle is
it's a big
shoes.
obstacle, right?
Yeah.
Like if all you have was your old Jordans, you're not gonna have fun running.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that's an example. Earlier this year we sent a bunch of waterproof boots to people with the hurricanes. We had a lot of people that were volunteering and they didn't have proper footwear to be out there volunteering, right? Yeah. Like doing actual hurricane relief. Yeah. So those shoes went there, right? So we also try to, we acknowledge that we're in a wasteful industry. So we also try to balance that out with initiatives like this.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you pointed that out too. I think that is something also that is apparent on your website. It talks about the impact. There's a whole section about it. And I do encourage everybody to go to Hoka.com and to learn more. Unfortunately, I don't have much more time. We got to start wrapping things up for today. I feel like we could probably talk for hours about this.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to have you back on sometime as well, because there's more that I want to learn about your story. But I really just appreciate you being here. The last thing I want you to ask is, where does the name Hoka come from?
Perfect. So the full name is Hoka One One. So you still see it in some old signs, or even when you get a shoe, somewhere in the box is going to say Hoka One One.
Okay, yeah.
So that's the full name, Hoka One One. It translates, it's from the Maori language, the indigenous language from New Zealand and all that region.
Yeah.
And it translates roughly fly over the earth.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? That's why our logo is
awesome.
kind of like a bird. Right?
Yeah, little flying wings.
Exactly. And well, we dropped the One because also in English is 1-1, and we had a lot of people like, I love my 11s. That's not what it is. Right. For marketing reasons, it's like Hoka now, but the full name is Hoka One. And it was basically, our founders, when they were pursuing, if we're going to make a shoe, what is our goal, right?
Yeah,
and like I said, go to this maximal stack, these geometries. Yeah. The vision was, I want to feel like I'm flying over the earth. Like this is effortless.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's how the name came.
Talk about optimistic and fun. That's really great. Well, Tovar, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been just a real pleasure having you on the podcast. For our first holiday episode, we're happy to get this out there around the holidays.
Let's get jolly.
And let's have you back sometime.
I would love to. It was a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Sounds of Health is brought to you by Nutmeg Insurance Advisors and recorded at the offices of Nutmeg Advisory Group. The podcast is produced by Jason Carubia and Dave MacNiven with music by Rob Hames. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, X, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Your support means a lot to us, and we appreciate it when you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you know someone who you think should be a guest on the show, please email us at soundsofhealthpodcast@gmail.com. Each week, we help you move the needle toward better health by spotlighting the stories, people, and resources that inspire and motivate others. And we are just getting started. Help us share these sounds, and don't keep us a secret.